Bill Rancic is a Chicago native, a New York Times bestselling author, and the winner of the very first season of The Apprentice. He's built businesses, led teams, inspired audiences across the country, and today he's here with us to share his story, his lessons, his vision for navigating uncertainty with confidence and creativity. And I'll tell you, a great restaurant chain on top of it. Please join me in welcoming, a warm welcome for our keynote speaker, Bill Rancic.
Hey guys. Oops. Hey there. Well, it's great to be in a room. So many professionals. But it's great to be in a room full of adults. And I'll explain. I recently was asked to speak at Purdue University on behalf of the Delta Gamma Sorority House. And Karen in my office said I would love to. And I thought, okay, this is going to be interesting. And I thought about it. I said, I'll do it. And two of my buddies found out that I was going, and they wanted to come. They thought we'd be the big men on campus. So we head to the airplane. And we're walking out the door. And as we're walking out the door, my wife, Juliana, is standing there, and she starts laughing. And I said, Juliana, what in the world is so funny? She said, well, you guys think when you get there, you're going to be the big men on campus. But let me explain to you how it's really going to go down. When you get there, everyone's going to think you're there for Parents' Weekend. I hate when she's right, because lo and behold, there I am at the Delta Gamma Sorority House, and this young woman came running up to me, and she was going on and on how she used to watch me on television. And then she went on to tell me that her grandmother was the true fan, and she wanted to send a picture to her grandmother. So it made me feel really old really fast. But it got me thinking that that show that I started out on, well, called The Apprentice, was 21 years ago. Has anyone ever seen that show? God, it was 21 years ago. It was the #1 show on television. And everywhere I go, people will stop and they ask me if, did you know you were going to win that when you first started taping? And I'm always honest with people. I had no idea. There were 15 other people. We had folks from Harvard and Yale and Wharton and all these fancy business schools. I was just a small business owner from Chicago, and I tell them I didn't know where I was going to stack up in the mix. But I go on to tell them that if they were to ask my mom claimed she knew I was going to win that show when I was 10 years old. And when I was 10 years old, my mom knew that I was born to be an entrepreneur. And it all started on my parents' wedding anniversary weekend. They were heading up to Lake Geneva, Wisconsin here for their big wedding anniversary, and they wanted to have some quality time alone. So they shipped me off to my grandmother's house, and I went. And I woke up Saturday morning, and there was my grandmother in the kitchen. She was cooking breakfast. And I was a really inquisitive guy, and I started asking my grandmother all these questions. How does this work? Why are you doing that? What goes there? So she decided she was going to pull me in the kitchen that morning. She was going to teach me how to cook. So I spent 7 hours in my grandmother's kitchen that morning, mastering the art of making the pancake. I could make a blueberry pancake, a banana pancake, you name it, I could make it. So I went to bed that night, and I woke up Sunday morning, and I popped out of bed, and I raced into my grandmother's kitchen. And the first thing I did is I picked up her old rotary telephone, and I called every old lady who lived on my grandmother's block, and I invited them to come over for a pancake breakfast. Well, these women loved it. They thought it was the neatest thing they'd ever seen, this 10-year-old kid flipping these pancakes in the air. So they ate their breakfast, they left, and when they left, I started clearing their plates away from the table, and as soon as I picked up that first plate, I realized I was onto something. You see, each and every one of those ladies left a $5 bill underneath her plate. And I thought, man, this is my ticket. This is my ticket to the riches. So I took the money, I put it in my pocket, I went back home, and I kept my mouth shut. Went to school that week. Friday afternoon, that school bus dropped me off in front of my parents' house, and I went blazing in the front door, demanding that my parents take me to my grandmother's for the weekend. Well, this went on for the next 5 weekends, and my mom couldn't quite understand this new relationship that I'd formed with my grandmother. I suppose I should say partnership. And then my mom was in my room one day, and she was putting something in one of my drawers, and she made a rather interesting discovery of her own. She found a stack of $5 bills hidden underneath my socks. And as any good mother out there would be, she was rather concerned, and she immediately called me up to my room, and she sat me down, and she demanded to know where a 10-year-old boy was able to come up with all this money. And I had to fess up I was running a makeshift restaurant out of my grandmother's house. My mom put that business to an end immediately. She claimed I was fleecing these old ladies out of their Social Security checks. But when I look back on that experience, whether I knew it or not at the age of 10, of course I didn't, I had a trait that I think is so important in anyone who wants to be successful in business, and that's having the ability to recognize an opportunity, but more importantly, reaching out, grabbing a hold of it, and do something with it. You know, most people go through life and they talk a hell of a game. I'm going to sell this much scrap. I'm going to do this. I'm going to write this book. But 99% of them never do it. So that was my start to becoming an entrepreneur. And I worked my way through college with a boat wash and wax business that I'd started. And when I got out of college, I took a job selling metals. I worked for a metals company called Fullerton Metals here. This was in 1994. And I'd been on the job about 8 or 9 months. And I'd watched a guy who'd been there for 30 years get fired for no other reason than greed. And the two owners, they fired this guy just because they didn't want to pay him that big salary that he was bringing in for them. And as he drove away from the parking lot, I said, I'm never going to let that happen to me. So I left the office that day, and I was determined to start my own business. And I started searching and searching and searching. And about, 6 or 8 months in, I was sitting at an outdoor cafe here, and these 3 European guys sat down at the table next to me, and they pulled out the biggest cigars I'd ever seen. And the way they were smelling these cigars and lighting these cigars, this idea came down to me like a bolt of lightning. I'm going to start the first ever Cigar of the Month Club. No one had ever done this. I'm going to send you 5 cigars every month to your house. I'm going to put a newsletter in there to educate you on these different cigars, and you can put a little gift in the box as well. So I left the cafe and I ran over to my buddy John's 400 square foot studio apartment, and I pitched him on the idea, and he was on board. So we decided we were going to open up this business, and we decided to make our world headquarters in his 400 square foot studio apartment. It's a little bit bigger than the stage I'm standing on. And we pushed the bed in the corner, and we got some used desks and some used computers from my brother-in-law. And I had 7 1-800 phone lines piped into this little apartment. And I was ready to get this business up and running. But there was one thing I had to do. I had to go in, I had to quit my job at the metals company. And I went in there and I sat down with the 2 owners, and I looked them right in the eye, and I said, I'm going to be a millionaire one day. And this is my idea. And you know what they did? They laughed. They said, a Cigar of the Month Club, that's the most ridiculous idea we've ever heard, kid. It's so ridiculous that when you run out of money in 6 weeks, we're going to hire you back, but with a 20% pay cut. Not quite the words of encouragement I was hoping for, but I left there and I was mad as hell, right? I love to prove people wrong, and I figured, how am I going to get the word out, right? My $24,000 that I had to start this business was now down to about $9,000. Wasn't going to buy me much of an advertising campaign. So I left my comfort zone, and I got back to that world headquarters, and I sat down at that used computer, and I typed a letter. And in the letter, I explained how this Cigar of the Month Club worked. And at the end of the letter, I asked for help. And I took the letter and I put it in an envelope, and I put the envelope inside a box because I knew a box would always get opened before a letter. And I put some cigars in that box. And then I went to a local costume shop, and I bought a pair of these thick Coke bottle nerd glasses. And I taped a little note right on the bridge of those glasses. And the note read, please take a closer look at my business idea. And I put the glasses on top of the cigars that were on top of that envelope. And I sealed the box up, and I made 10 of them. And I sent them out to the top 10 morning drive radio shows here in Chicago. And about a week after those packages went out, my phone rang. And I got a call from the producer of the Jonathan Brandmeier morning radio show. It was the #1 morning radio show here in Chicago in 1994. And she said, Brandmeier will have you on his show for 5 minutes. She said, make your 5 minutes count. And everyone in this room knows the value of 5 minutes, right? Between closing a deal and losing a deal, between making a great first impression or a horrible first impression. So I go to the radio station the morning I'm supposed to, and I meet Brandmeier, the radio personality, and we hit it off instantly. And my 5 minutes turned into 35 minutes at the heart of morning rush hour. And he starts telling his listeners how he's been a member of this Cigar of the Month Club for years. I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a legal issue for sure. He's going on and on and on, but he kept giving out my 1-800 number every 15 or 20 seconds. So I finished the interview, and I'll never forget that day. There was a huge convention going on, and I couldn't get a cab, so I have to sprint back to our headquarters. It's probably a mile. And I get back there, and I'm all out of breath, and I kick that door open. And lo and behold, I see my partner, John. He has one phone on his left ear, one on his right ear. Every one of those phones in our office is ringing. And I reach over, and I pick up the first phone I can get my hands on, and I take an order from this woman. She orders a 12-month subscription to the Cigar of the Month Club. I literally had to stop, and I had to say, ma'am, are you sure? Like, it's $40 a month. She was sure. I hung up the phone. I looked over at my partner, John. I said, John, looks like we're going to be in business for at least a year, because I just took a 12-month subscription to the Cigar of the Month Club. recognizing an opportunity and seizing it. So I took that same letter and I sent them to radio stations in New York and Los Angeles, Detroit, Seattle. All these radio stations were having me on the air, and it wasn't costing me a penny. Phones were ringing off the hook. So I said, man, if this works with radio, it's certainly going to work with television, right? It's the next logical step. So I modified that letter and I bought every pair of those Coke bottle nerd glasses I could get my hands on. And I sent them out to every single daytime talk show on TV. And the first call I get is not the call I'd hoped for. I got a call from the producers of the Danny Bonaducci daytime talk show. I got on Danny Bonaducci's show twice before it got canceled. It was on the air for about 10 weeks. But then we got the products on Good Morning America, and we got them on some of the national news shows. And within the first 30 days, we had those phone lines turned on for business. We had over 1,000 members getting these packages sent to their home each and every month. And then Father's Day came, and we picked up 4,000 members. And then the next Christmas season came, and we got 10,000 members. And this thing kept growing and growing and growing. And I was able to recognize that the .com world was starting to take over, and the world was changing around me. And I said, hey, wait a minute. I need to adapt. I need to react. I need to adjust. Otherwise, I'll become extinct. And I slowly started changing the way I reached my customers, selling to casinos and country clubs and resorts all around the country. My competitors, they were doing the beer of the month and the wine of the month. They stayed in their comfort zone. They kept doing things the way they'd always done them, and they both wound up filing for bankruptcy. So I wound up selling that business in late 1999, 2000. And just after I'd sold the business, I got a call from a friend of mine's mother. She was a talent agent for children here in Chicago. And she said, Billy, she called me Billy. She said, I got a fax that came across my desk. There's a new show on NBC. They're looking for young entrepreneurs. It's with Donald Trump. And if you can do this and win it, you can become his right-hand man. She said, what do you think? I said, well, it sounds interesting. Can you maybe shoot me over some more information about it? She goes, nope. I made you an appointment on Thursday at 3:00. You better be there. She was a tough cookie. You don't want to say no to her. So I go to this meeting and they start explaining the concept of the Apprentice TV show. We start a new business from scratch each week. Winning team, a losing team, someone gets fired. They had 215,000 people apply. After the meetings, I went through about 5 or 6 days of meetings. They actually offered me a spot to be the alternate contestant on the show. So it's worse being the last one picked. Remember when you were a kid, you were the last one picked? Well, I'm one step past that. I was the alternate, right? You can appreciate that. And then someone didn't fail. They failed the drug test or whatever, and they called me up from the bench. So I was the last one to enter the show. And it was crazy. Week after week after week, we were starting these businesses. We operated on 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night. And then before I knew it, I looked to my right and I looked to my left. And there was only one other person still left in this competition. It was just my luck. He happened to have his MBA from Harvard. So it was the kid who started out in the metals business versus the Harvard MBA. And then on live national television in front of, I think it was 25 million people, Trump hired me on. And it was an amazing moment of my life. But my celebration literally lasted a moment because I was immediately whisked away and I had to go on a 2-week tour of all the talk shows, the Today Show, Jay Leno's Tonight Show, all the shows you could imagine. You know, where were they back in 94 when I was stuck doing the Danny Bonaducci show? Sure as hell could have used them then. But I finished the tour and I made my way back home to Chicago. And it was the first time I'd experienced any peace or quiet in literally months. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, why me? What separated me from the pack of all these people who started this journey with me? 215,000 people started the race. Why was I the last one standing? And I think there were 3 reasons why I was able to win this. And I think these are why people are successful in their businesses. The first one is I understood and I embraced the term practical execution. Ever since I was a little kid, my dad would always say to me, actions speak louder than words. Show me, don't tell me. And on that show, a lot of people talked a great game. They got into the office politics and all the game playing. I put my head down, I kept my mouth shut, and I delivered results week after week after week. Secondly, it was about agility. It was about adjusting and reacting and changing my management style and my strategy based on the task I was given. And thirdly, it's about risk. It's about understanding risk. It's about managing risk, respecting risk, and converting risk into success. Now, success is a funny word, and I often wonder why are some people successful in business and statistically the majority not. And it's a hard answer to give you, but my answer is really simple, and it comes down to one word, and that word is fear. I don't know if you knew this, but when we're born into this world, we're only born with two natural fears: the fear of falling and the fear of loud noises. And every other fear we have is learned. And so many people are afraid they're going to fail. They're afraid they're going to make a mistake. They're afraid what their friends or their colleagues are going to say about an innovative idea, but they never even try. In my opinion, that's the biggest failure of them all. I know all about fear. When I first won that show, I had to learn how to build a high-rise. There's a big high-rise here in Chicago that I got to work on for many years. And I got sent to a town called White Plains, New York, to work with a fellow who was the CEO of a major construction company all up and down the eastern seaboard. And I was on the job about a week, and I was really scared of this guy. He was this big, burly guy from Brooklyn in the construction business. This is when the Sopranos TV show was popular, so my mind was racing. And it turned out he was a brilliant guy, and I'm still very dear friends with him today. But he taught me a really important lesson, and I practice it today. And as I was leaving the office one day, he said to me, "Hey, kid, be the conductor." And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, sounds great. Have a good night." So I'm riding back into Manhattan from White Plains, and I started to think about what he said. Be the conductor. Was he referring to the conductor of a locomotive? What was this guy getting at? And then it hit me. He was referring to the conductor of an orchestra. You see, the conductor of an orchestra has all these expert musicians in his or her pit, and they play their instruments to absolute perfection. The conductor himself or herself is not an expert at playing each and every one of those instruments, but he gets them all to play in harmony with one another. And the moral of his story is so many of us stunt our growth in business because we let our egos get in the way. We try to play every single instrument out there, right? We say, "I've been doing this for 30 years. Don't tell me what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing." We're not open to new ideas. We're not open to changing our ways. And we wind up here. When we conduct, right? When we realize, wait a minute, maybe there's someone who can help me with digital marketing. Maybe there's someone who can help me with these algorithms to figure out, how I can do better, or I can use AI to transform my business. Those are the people who end up here. So part of being the conductor for me was being a good people watcher. Any people watchers in the room? God, you can learn so much good and bad by people watching. And over the last 20 years, I've met some incredible businessmen, and I've studied them. And I've really tried to understand, why are they in that rare air, right? And I extrapolated 3 traits they all have that I try to emulate. And the first one is they're all good decision makers, right? Most people go through life and they have analysis paralysis. They have one foot on the pier and one foot on the boat, and they don't know whether to go out to sea or stay on land. And they look back at the end of their careers with tremendous regret. The people who are in the rare air, they arm themselves with knowledge and they take advantage of those opportunities before the opportunities pass them by. So they're good decision makers. They're all creative. They find creative ways to motivate their team, to market themselves, to be a valuable part of the community. They find creative ways to get the word out. And thirdly, they have that never quit, never make excuse mindset. And I see it today more and more, especially with the younger generation. Sorry if you're out there. The first thing they do when times get tough is they do this. They point to their left and they point to their right, and they blame everyone and everything around them. I had a slow year in sales. We had a rough winter. They come up with every single excuse in the book. The people who are in that rare air, they don't do this. They do this because they realize at the end of the road, there's no one else to blame but themselves. So I've been around great business minds, and I've also been around some of the worst. I used to work on a show for the A&E network called We Mean Business. And it was a show where I got to go in and help small businesses that were failing. And I spent about 8 months going from business to business to business. And I put my heart and soul into this because I truly believe that small business is the backbone of our country. And I wanted to help these folks out. And about 60% of them made it. 40% of them went bust. But after I spent all that time working with these businesses, I asked myself, what do they all have in common? What are these people all doing that is really helping them knock on death's door as far as business goes? And there were 3 traits they all have. And if I start falling into this area, I try to correct myself. One, they're all reactive rather than proactive, right? They like that drama in their lives. They wait for problems to arise, and then they feel important when they can solve those problems, right? It's the ego, right? The smart ones are anticipating problems before the problem comes up, so it never even exists. So these people are reactive rather than proactive. Secondly, they surround themselves around negative people. Interesting study I read. It said the majority of the people we come into contact with on a daily basis are negative. It went on to say that you're never going to be able to eliminate these people from your lives, but when you're aware of who they are and what their intentions are, you negate their power. And when you're on a track upward, when you're doing amazing things, when you're at the top of your business, top of your game, there's always going to be those people who wish they had your drive, your ambition, your vision, but they don't. So you know what they try to do? They try to pull you down in order to build themselves up. So they're reactive rather than proactive. They surround themselves around negative people. And lastly, they don't understand the power of potential. Potential is probably the best God-given asset we have, yet I truly believe it's the most underutilized. And when we're born into this world, God gives us a certain amount of currency in the form of potential. And it's up to us to make it grow. It's up to us to make it multiply. And so many of these people let others tell them what they can and cannot do in life. And that's the biggest failure of them all. And I was fortunate enough to work with someone who you all know, who I really felt embodied the power of potential better than anyone I'd ever seen. And my wife worked with her for 20 years on TV. Her name is Joan Rivers. Everyone know who Joan Rivers is? So Joan was an amazing TV personality, but she was also an amazing entrepreneur. And she died, I guess it's about 10 years ago. And my wife and I went to her funeral in New York. Funniest funeral you've ever been to. It was incredible. Felt bad for the rabbi there because he was mortified by what was being said on the altar. And after the service, we all, about 100 of us, got invited back to her apartment on Fifth Avenue. And I was at the party for a little bit. And I noticed that about 80 of the 100 people had these little stick pins on their lapels. And the stick pins were of a bumblebee. And I turned to my wife, Julianne. I said, "What's with all the bumblebees?" She goes, "I don't know. Joan always considered herself a bumblebee." So we stayed for another hour or so and got back to our hotel, and it was still on my mind. So I sat down on my computer and I Googled bumblebee. And as soon as the first thing popped up, I got it. You see, when you Google bumblebee, one of the first things that comes up is the bumblebee, by all reasonable laws of physics, was never meant to fly. Its wing-to-weight ratio should prohibit it from ever getting liftoff from the ground. But no one ever told the bee that, and the bee flies. You see, Joan loved the bumblebee because she didn't let people tell her whether she could or could not fly. Everyone said, "You can't host a late-night TV show. You're a woman. It's never been done." She did it. They said, "You can't host, or you can't sell $100 million worth of jewelry on the Home Shopping Network. It's never been done." She did it. She understood the power of potential. She understood the gifts that she's been given, and she didn't let people tell her what she could or could not do. So the power of potential is so important, and I want to end with this story, and I wrote it down. It's a really cool story. It says, "I heard somebody say that the wealthiest places on earth, not Fort Knox or the oil fields in the Middle East, nor is it the gold and diamond mines in South Africa. Ironically, the wealthiest places on earth are the cemeteries, because lying in those graves are all kinds of dreams and desires that will never be fulfilled. Buried beneath the ground are books that will never be written, businesses that will never be started, and relationships that will never be formed. Sadly, the incredible power of potential is lying in those graves. So it's up to us to be agile. It's up to us to not use fear as a way to stunt our growth. And it's up to us to lift others around us. To whom much is given, much is expected. And if we've been given gifts, we have to pay that forward. I think it's truly important. And in this business, we're going to have ups and downs. Life's not going to be a straight path up. But I like to end every speech with this: tough times don't last, but tough people do. Thank you guys so much for having me here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. We've got microphones, or you can stand up. We're going to do a little Q&A if anyone has any questions that they want to ask. Anything goes here. Yes, anyone? Yes, sir.
I'll bite. This is working. Hello.
Yeah.
First off, I think that tower across the river there has been one of my favorite buildings on the Chicago skyline for a long time.
Oh,
congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
I always loved watching you on The Apprentice with my great grandmother. She was,
Thanks. I'll send her a selfie.
So in all seriousness, and this isn't a political thing, it's a business thing, but yeah, as you know, in metals business, our day to day is so much impacted by, whatever's going to come out of the White House. So I was curious, from your experience working with Donald Trump. What, as we're all together here trying to strategize next year, as you know, the copper, brass, steel, zinc, whatever it is,
Sold it all.
what insight can you give us into how decisions are made in his inner circle that can help us here today?
Yeah, I'll give you, I mean, I'll be honest. He treated me very well. I think he tried to lift me up and he wanted me to be the best I could, to do the best I could. And I think that's what he wants for our country. He wants us to be strong, to be wealthy, to be, safe. You know what I mean? I think that's his agenda here. There's not much in it for him. You know what I mean? Like, at a certain level, it's just not, he genuinely loves our country. And if you look back at some of the old footage from the late 80s, you know, he's been saying this for 25, 30 years. So my experience with him was very positive. He treated me like a son. He was very uplifting to me, always there for advice. And I think, you know, he has that same view with every single person living in this country. He wants us to be prosperous and to do well. I hope that answered your question. I'm not trying to get political here either. So anyone else have any questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you for sharing your story. Just, you know, as you mentioned, you care about small businesses, and one of the aspects of the small business landscape that's changing that maybe small businesses don't know how to deal with is, you know, the coming AI wave, or the already here AI wave even. So, you know, what do you see as someone who's worked with small businesses and care about small businesses? It may feel like the internet did, you know, almost 30 years ago now, where, you know, it's hard to imagine how the internet was going to impact us. So now it feels like it's hard to imagine how AI will impact us. But what do you maybe see coming down the pike for small businesses with AI?
One, I think small business is the backbone of our economy, right? They employ more people than any other sector out there. If you look at all the big businesses out there, or most of them, they started in a garage, in a basement, on a dining room table, right? So I think that is something we need to nurture. We need to protect. We need to make sure that we keep small business alive, for our country. I think if you look at AI, and as you did use the analogy with the internet, you think of how many jobs now have been created because of the internet, because of the digital world, right? And I think the same thing is going to happen with AI. I think it's going to make our lives better. We're going to be healthier as a result of that. We were just talking about longevity and wellness. And I think I was talking to a guy who owns, Abacus. It's a company. They buy life insurance policies, and they have data like no other. And he was telling me that if we can, no matter what age you are, if you can survive the next 7 years, the odds of you living well into your hundreds goes up exponentially, right? I mean, that's incredible data. So if you can make it from now to 7 years from now, when this was 8 months ago, so, you know, 6.5 years from now, AI is going to just change the way we diagnose diseases, the way we treat diseases, right? So I think it's exciting, and I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity around it. You know, certainly there's going to be some, you know, jobs that go away and they're jettisoned, but I think you're going to have a lot more that are created because of it. You know, it's going to be like drinking water out of a fire hose, if that makes sense. So anyone else? Yes, sir.
What is your favorite dish at one of your restaurants?
What is my favorite dish at the RPM? So I own, one of the owners of the RPM restaurant group. We have 5 restaurants here. We have them in DC, Washington, DC. I'm sorry, Vegas, Washington, DC, Orlando's coming, West Palm Beach. What is my favorite dish? Well, we have an RPM steak here, and I like the Duke. It's a beautiful ribeye bone-in. It's named after my son. That's spectacular. And then if you go to RPM Italian, we have Mama De Pandi's Bucatini Pomodoro, and that was, we based the first restaurant off of that recipe. So it was my wife's grandmother's recipe from Naples, Italy. And, it's exceptional. If anyone needs any reservations tonight, I'm happy to help.
My daughter's on her way to New York City today to go to the Institute of Culinary Excellence for Restaurant Management. My wife's family has a Italian restaurant in Bakersfield, 115 years old. And her uncle, my daughter's uncle, is wanting her to do restaurant management. Give me some advice. I need to tell my daughter because of your success. What do I need to tell her about her experience? And is it really worth what she's doing? It's a dream of hers, but what do you have?
It's a tough business. Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. It's tough hours, but I think, it's all about exceeding people's expectations, and that it carries over into any aspect of business, right? So if she's good in that, she can do just about anything. And that's our goal. When you come in, we are going to exceed your expectations. We're going to surprise you. We're going to do things you didn't expect, and when we first opened our RPM Italian, the first one 15 years ago, we got a lot of criticism. What do these reality TV people know about the restaurant business? And I have it hanging in my office. We got like a 1-star review from one of the local newspapers here. I think it was the Tribune. And I always look at that. And I knew that we could get him in the door once. But if we didn't have the most incredible ingredients, if we didn't have service that was over the top, we'd never survive. And that first restaurant, we prayed that it would do 7 million in its first year, and it did 14 million. And it's still, that was still growing. So, now we have 1,200 people on the team, among all the restaurants, and we're a big family. And everyone knows that, you have the power to make things right if it's wrong. And, we give you that latitude to go above and beyond. And I think that's something that we try to do with all of our businesses. We have a Italian wine business. It's called Giuliana Prosecco. And now we're in the food business. We have, the pasta sauces and meatballs and olive oil and about 3,000 stores around the country right now. It's called Mama DePandi's Italian Fine Foods. You like how I'm marketing this? You guys don't even know what I'm selling you, but thank you for asking the question. But we believe in going above and beyond. Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I'll be hanging around here if anyone wants to chat. So, I appreciate you guys coming here today. I look forward to meeting some of you after here, and have a great rest of the show, everybody. Enjoy Chicago. Thank you, guys.